Okay, so welcome back. This is part 3 in our series where we show you how to write a very simple application that will automatically, in the background, back up any files and folders on your computer. And not only can it do it by saving those files and folders to different storage locations on your computer, but it can also copy those files and folders to different computers on the same network as long as they are shared on the network. In the previous videos, we showed you how to start out with the code you've got here. It's basically a console application. And what it does is it takes a simple text file like you see here that specifies, for example, in this first line, we're saying we want to save any new or updated files and folders inside this D documents location. And we want to copy them to this F documents location on the computer. We can also make this, like I said, a shared folder on a different computer on the same network. And then we can have another, what's called a rule in the next line, which says we also want to take everything from C users and copy it over to F users as long as it's new or updated. And you can make as many of these rules as you want. And we showed you in the first part of this series how to go through and do that. And also in another video, we showed you how to automate this. Basically, our application is just a console application. What we're using to schedule this is this free, what's called the task scheduler, which is included for free in Microsoft Windows. And a lot of applications use this task scheduler to schedule applications in the background, whether you want them to occur every hour or day or week or month or whatever. And we're using that task schedule to schedule this console application to do backups whenever we want. Now in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to add some functionality to the logging feature of this application, which basically every time we do a scheduled backup, it's going to give us a text output like you see here. It tells us what time it happened, what was the rule number, and what we're going to do is we're going to add some what are called exceptions. And that's something we're going to use to tell us if, for example, if we didn't have access to, for example, a folder on our computer that is being backed up, it will give us some output. And it also tells us what's the source path, the target path, is the target path accessible, how many folders and files were created or overwritten, how long it took. And we're adding this exception functionality. Now, as you can see here, what we're doing is we're just sending out to this log file the entire text of the exception that may happen if we don't have, for example, don't have access to a folder. So what we're going to do in this application, we're not only going to do this printing the exception as a log, we're also going to show you how to do some fancy string manipulation and parsing so that we can access, for example, what you see here, which is the core of what we need to know. In this case, access to the certain path was denied, and all this other stuff we don't really need. So we're just going to show you how to parse this string and put it into the log file so we don't have all this other stuff. So here is our console application in C# Visual Studio that we developed in the previous 2 videos. Not many changes at all here, some very simple modifications. Use the same using statements, the general properties, same thing as we had before, how many rules we've got, what is the input path for the rules that we showed you, what's the output path for the log, the text file, and then we're going to have a list of rule class objects. And we showed how we can, for each rule, each line of the input file that defines what folder we want to back up, it's got all of the data associated with that rule. And we're keeping a list of rules called rules. So the only 2 lines I've added, the 2 properties, a public static bool test run equals true. All this is going to do is going to allow us to, instead of going through and actually copying files and folders, it's going to allow us to just go through the motions of doing it and keep track of how many we would have done, but not actually copy files and folders or generate new folders. And it's really nice if you're going to do some testing, you don't want to mess with your files and folders and make any errors. We also are going to maintain a list of string called exceptions. And that's going to be whenever we find out that we can't have access to a file or folder on our computer that we want to back up, we're going to store the exception in this list of string, and then we're going to be able to parse it to get rid of the superfluous data and just get the data we want. So those are the only two new things we have here in the properties. Now here's our static void main. The only thing I've added here in the beginning is, you don't need this, but I've decided that each time I run this, I want to delete any existing log file and start from scratch. So if file exists, whatever the log file path is, delete it. So then we're going to get a list of rules from the file, and it's going to instantiate a rule class object that has all the data for each line, and that is a rule. So then for each rule in the list of rules that are generated from that method, we're going to get the source path. We're going to do a stopwatch. We've talked about all this before. And we're going to check if the target is accessible, where we want to copy over to. We're going to update the target directories and the target files given each rule and each source folder. Then when we're done, we stop the stopwatch, find the lapse time, and then save the data to file, and then we're going to clear our exceptions. So that's the basic, what we talked about previously. All we're going to do here is in these methods, we've got the get rules from file, checked if the target is accessible, and in the update target directories where it says for each rule and directory info folder, it's going to go through and do an update. Before we had, we're going to enumerate the directories in the source folder and get a list of directory info for the source folder, and then we can check that against what's in the target folder. So what I'm doing is I'm now wrapping that in a try catch. So if we can't get any of those, we're going to get an error when we try to enumerate directories, and we're going to catch using this exception. And we're going to add to the list of exceptions, we're going to say rule plus whatever rule number it is, plus the exception that was grabbed to string. And that's going to give us, for each exception, that very verbose data in our list of exceptions. And then we're going to return because we couldn't access that folder. So this will build up our list of exceptions that we can then parse. And if everything's okay, there were no exceptions, it's going to go through and do what we had before. It's going to try and back up the source folder that we want backed up. Now, the only thing I've added down here is if we show that the directory of the target path doesn't exist and we're going to have to create a new directory and copy over some files, instead of actually doing that, if we said test run equals true, we don't want to actually create directories and copy files. Only if test run equals false do we want to do it. Otherwise, if we don't want to actually create directories and copies, it will count the number of folders created as if we did, and then it's going to go through and call update target files and do the same thing. But this is so we can do some testing. So the next thing we're going to do is update target files, and we're going to do about the same thing. We're doing the enumerate files, we're putting it into a try catch just as we did before. And then we also are setting up if test run equals false. When we are doing this copy to, we're generating new files, copying to target path. And then this is if we have a file that's newer than what's in the target. Again, we're doing if test run equals false, we're going to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to actually do it. We're just going to make believe we did. So now that we've stored any exceptions in that list, what we need to do is figure out how to parse that into the log file so it's a little bit more readable and we don't have a lot of extraneous data. So everything else is going to be the same. I moved some of these around, but basically the important thing here is for each string EX in exceptions, our list of exceptions, we can either do in our stream writer to the log file, we can write the entire exception, or we can parse it. So what this is going to do, if we just write the entire exception, it's going to be like we had before. It's going to have all of this information. But what we want to do is we just want to get the part that says access to the path, whatever the path is denied. So how are we going to extract just that line from all of this information in each exception? And what we're going to do is we're going to use the string.indexOf, and that's going to give us the location of the first element, whatever string we pass it. So it's going to look through that string, EX, for the substring access to the path, and it's going to give us the index of the first element, or that A, in access to the path. So then we know where that important substring starts. We know what the element is. And then we want to know what's the index of the is denied, because we don't know the intermediate string, how long that's going to be. It depends on the path itself. But we want to know what's the index of this string, and it's going to give us the index of the I in is. And we're going to add 10 elements to that I index, and that will give us the end of this string. And then we know what the substring is going to be. It's going to start with this string start index, and then it's going to be the string end index minus string start plus 10. And the 10 is the length of this set of characters. So now we can do a string.substring to get just the part that starts with access to the path and ends with is denied. And once we've got that, we can do the substring is sub, and we can just write that substring. So let's run this and see what we get. And here is the results. It's basically taken out everything for each of the exceptions. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exceptions, and it has taken just the access to the path, whatever is denied, and printed those out. So really nice way to extract data from these very long exceptions. Okay, so this application is pretty much ready to use. You can use it manually just by running this console application, or you can use, as we talked about before, the task scheduler in Windows to automate it, do it in the background. You don't even know what's happening, and it's automatically updating your files and folders. All you have to do is set up the rules in this text file with the source and target separated by commas. You can have as many directories that you want to back up, and just make sure you check the log file every once in a while. There are additional features that we may look into. For example, instead of having this entry of the rules in a CSV file, you could have a user interface that prepares everything and sets everything up for you. You could also, for example, specify, all right, we want all of the files and folders in this D documents backed up, except for maybe you wanted it to ignore some particular folders. So you could also set that up, and then the more information you want to include in this, the more you might decide to have a separate Windows Forms application, a user interface that makes it a lot easier to enter all that data, open file dialogues and that kind of thing. We may look at that in the future. But that's it for this one. If you're liking these videos, I encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, but most of all, please let others know that we're here so we get some views. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.